Hey there, and welcome to your deep dive into Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. You've sent us tons of notes and excerpts from this classic, so I think it's safe to say that you're ready to tackle those everyday anxieties. We're here to unlock Carnegie's wisdom with you and find those practical tools for a calmer, more fulfilling life.
You know what I find so fascinating about Carnegie?
Yeah.
He doesn't just talk about worry. He gives you these actionable techniques, and then he backs them up with stories of real people who actually use them to transform their lives.
Right.
It's like he's handing you a toolbox.
Okay, I love that. A worry toolbox. He starts with this idea of daytight compartments, which he borrows from Sir William Osler. Imagine shutting out all of yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's anxieties,
Hmm.
just focusing solely on the present moment.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Because so often we get tripped up, trying to live in the past or the future even for a second. But we can only truly experience right now. Trying to do anything else just cripples us with worry.
It reminds me of that story about Mrs. E.K. Shields. After losing her husband, she was just in despair, on the verge of suicide, actually struggling financially, just completely overwhelmed. But then she comes across this quote, "Every day is a new life to a wise man."
And that one sentence changes everything for her. She starts living by the motto, today is a new life, focusing on just one day at a time. And it's really amazing how she found peace and even achieved a level of success she hadn't thought possible, just by shifting her focus to the present.
It makes you realize that even when life feels hopeless, you can find a way through just by concentrating on what you can control, this present moment.
Absolutely. And building on that, Carnegie emphasizes the need to face our worries head on. He has this three-step formula from Willis H. Carrier, the guy who invented modern air conditioning. It helps you dismantle worry by confronting it directly.
Okay, so walk me through this formula. How do you actually take worry head on?
Well, it starts with being brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Analyze the situation and ask yourself, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen? That's step one.
Okay, so you're not shying away from the fear, you're staring it right in the face.
Exactly. Step two is where it gets really interesting. Mentally accept that worst-case scenario. Now, Carrier found that once he accepted the worst, he felt this sense of peace. The crippling fear subsided, and he could think clearly again.
That's such a counterintuitive idea, but I can see how it would work. It's like once you've made peace with the worst possibility, the fear of the unknown kind of loses its grip on you. You're free to focus on finding solutions.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's step three. You start exploring ways to improve upon that worst-case scenario. By accepting the worst, you take away its power to paralyze you, and you can approach the situation with a clear, rational perspective.
Carnegie tells this wild story about a New York oil dealer who used this formula to escape a blackmail attempt. Some of his drivers were allegedly involved in some shady dealings with oil rations, and this guy was being pressured for hush money.
Oh, man. Can you imagine the stress? He was beside himself with worry for days, until he finally remembered Carrier's formula. He asked himself, what's the absolute worst that could happen? And the answer, of course, was that his business might be ruined.
Which is a terrifying thought. But by accepting that possibility, he was able to think straight and finally consult his lawyer.
And that's when things took a turn for the better. It turned out that the whole thing was a scam. The so-called government agent was actually a wanted criminal.
Wow. So by facing his fear, the oil dealer not only saved himself thousands of dollars, but he also avoided a potential PR nightmare.
Exactly. This story really highlights how, when you let those worries run wild, they cloud your judgment. You can't find solutions. But by confronting them head on, accepting the possibility of them becoming reality, you free your mind to find a way forward.
Exactly. And often that way forward is paved with action. One of Carnegie's most powerful pieces of advice is to keep busy. He says that purposeful activity can be an incredible antidote to worry. You know, this really resonates with me. I find that when I'm totally absorbed in a project or a task, something that demands my full attention, those nagging worries just kind of fade into the background. There's no room for them.
That's the human mind at work. Carnegie tells this heart-wrenching story about a father who found comfort in this principle after experiencing unimaginable loss. He lost two young daughters in a row, and the grief was just debilitating.
Oh gosh, that's just heartbreaking. How could anyone cope with that kind of loss?
It's hard to imagine. But then one day, his young son asked him to build a toy boat. Now, this father was in no mood for boat building, but he eventually agreed.
And that simple act of building this toy boat offered a moment of respite from his grief.
Exactly. As he got lost in building that boat, he experienced a few precious hours of peace. Building the boat demanded his complete concentration, and in those moments of focused activity, he escaped the clutches of worry and grief.
So he stumbled upon a powerful connection between taking action and calming his mind. What did he do with that realization?
He started making lists, repairs projects, anything to keep him occupied. He even threw himself into civic activities, joined committees, all to keep his mind and body engaged.
That's a powerful testament to the idea of staying busy, but not just busy with intention. It seems like having a sense of purpose behind those actions is key to crowding out the worry.
You've hit on a crucial point. Carnegie actually connects this to a fundamental law of psychology. The human mind can't fully focus on two different things simultaneously.
So it's like a mental tug of war. You can't
Right.
be consumed by worry and fully engaged in an activity at the same time.
Right, one will always win out. And as we saw with the grieving father, sometimes the best way to win that tug of war with worry is to choose to focus your attention on something positive and productive.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about those times when your worries feel totally justified? Like, how can you not worry when you're facing a potentially life-altering situation?
That's where Carnegie introduces another powerful tool, the law of averages. He argues that we often overestimate the likelihood of our fears coming true. By taking a step back and looking at the statistical probabilities, we can often alleviate a lot of unnecessary anxiety.
So you're saying it's like taking your worries to court and demanding evidence. Don't just let them run rampant, cross-examine them, and see if they hold up under scrutiny.
I like the way you think.
Yeah.
A perfect example is Lloyd's of London, the world-famous insurance company. They build a successful business on this very principle. They essentially bet against our worries.
Hold on. Are you saying that they profit from our tendency to overestimate risk?
You could say that they insure against all sorts of disasters, lost ships, damaged cargo, because they understand that statistically, these events are less likely to occur than people imagine. That's the law of averages at work.
So they're using data and probabilities to calm our irrational fears, which is pretty clever. But how can we apply this in our own lives? We're not all insurance companies.
It's about cultivating an awareness of our tendency to catastrophize.
Right.
Next time you're consumed by worry, ask yourself, what are the actual odds of this happening? You might be surprised how often the reality is far less scary than the stories your mind creates.
That's a really empowering reminder. So instead of passively accepting your worries as truth, you need to interrogate them, challenge them with facts, and see if they hold water. And this whole discussion about confronting your fears reminds me of another key theme in Carnegie's book: learning to cooperate with the inevitable.
Ah, yes. Embracing the wisdom of accepting what we cannot change. It's a cornerstone of finding peace.
Because let's be real, we're going to encounter situations in life that are simply beyond our control, no matter how much we might wish it were otherwise.
Absolutely. And fighting those situations, railing against the unfairness of it all, that only leads to more suffering. Carnegie tells this really interesting story from his childhood that perfectly illustrates this principle.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the story.
Okay, so picture a young Dale Carnegie playing with friends in an old, abandoned log house. He's climbing down from the attic, jumps from a windowsill,
Oh no, I don't like where this is going.
and his ring gets caught on a nail.
Ouch.
A nail that just happened to be in the exact wrong place at the wrong time. And you know what happens next? He tears off his finger.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. The pain, the terror he must have felt.
It was traumatic, no doubt.
Mm.
But here's the thing. After his hand healed, he never wasted a moment worrying about it. It was done. He had no choice but to accept it.
He learned to cooperate with the inevitable. He couldn't change what had happened, so he chose to move on and focus on what he could control.
Precisely. There's this beautiful inscription on the ruins of a 15th century cathedral in Amsterdam that captures this perfectly. It can't be otherwise.
It's such a potent reminder that sometimes your best course of action is simply to accept what is found. Acknowledge that some things are beyond your control and find a way to move forward.
Exactly. And speaking of moving forward, Carnegie emphasizes that learning to accept the inevitable often requires letting go of the past, another recurring theme in his work.
Right.
He even dedicates a whole chapter to it.
Yes. Let the past bury its dead. Such a powerful image, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
Carnegie argues that dwelling on past mistakes, harboring regrets, reliving old hurts, it's like trying to sawdust. It's utterly pointless, and it only drains your energy and steals your joy.
It's like that old saying, don't cry over spilled milk. What's done is done. You can either choose to carry the weight of those past experiences, or you can set them down and move forward.
Exactly. And Carnegie tells this fascinating story about Mark Twain that shows how absurd it is to cling to the past. Twain was once so upset over a business failure. I think it was something to do with a publishing venture that he became physically ill with worry.
Oh, I can relate to that. Sometimes when I make a mistake or things don't go my way, I just work myself up into this frenzy of regret.
Well, it seems Twain was quite good in that. But here's the thing. The situation that caused him so much distress, the business failure, the financial ruin he feared it never actually happened.
Wait, so he was agonizing over something that never even came to pass?
That's right. It was a classic case of borrowing trouble, as Carnegie calls it. Twain had worried himself sick over an imagined disaster, a disaster that, in reality, posed no actual threat.
What a waste of energy. And probably a lot of sleepless nights, too.
Exactly. And it's something we're all guilty of from time to time.
Hmm.
Our imaginations are powerful tools capable of conjuring up all sorts of terrifying scenarios. We allow ourselves to get swept away in this current of what-ifs and if-onlys, completely missing that we're creating our own misery.
It's like we're starring in our own personal horror movies, and we're both the director and the terrified victim. We get so caught up in the drama that we forget to check if the monster is even real.
I love that analogy. And Carnegie offers this brilliant piece of advice for dealing with these self-created monsters. Treat past mistakes and misfortunes the same way you treat a physical injury.
Okay, that's an interesting comparison. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. When you suffer a physical injury, like a cut or a burn, you don't spend all your time focusing on the pain and wishing it hadn't happened. You tend to the wound, bandage it up, and allow your body to heal.
So you acknowledge the injury, but you don't dwell on it. You focus on the healing process on moving forward.
Precisely. Carnegie suggests we adopt a similar approach when dealing with past mistakes and regrets. Acknowledge them, learn from them, and then make a conscious decision to let them go.
To stop picking at the scab, so to speak.
Exactly. Just like constantly picking at a scab prevents a wound from healing, constantly dwelling on past mistakes prevents you from growing and moving forward.
So how do you break free from this cycle of dwelling on the past? How do you stop sawing sawdust and start focusing on building something new?
Carnegie has several practical suggestions. One approach he advocates is to reframe your perspective. Look for the valuable lessons hidden within your past experiences.
Find the silver linings, those hidden nuggets of wisdom that can help you navigate future challenges with more grace and understanding.
Precisely. Instead of viewing your past mistakes as sources of shame and regret, choose to see them as opportunities for growth and learning.
It's about shifting your focus from what you could have done differently to what you can learn from the experience and how you can apply those lessons moving forward.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even your mistakes can serve a purpose. They can help you develop greater resilience, compassion, and wisdom.
And sometimes those lessons can come from unexpected sources. Carnegie tells a story about a discouraged book salesman who learned a valuable lesson about letting go of the past from a rather surprising source, Jack Dempsey, the legendary boxer.
Yes, if I'm remembering this correctly, Dempsey had just suffered a crushing defeat to Gene Tunney, a loss that shocked the boxing world, and it seems deeply affected Dempsey.
And the book salesman, feeling down on his luck and worried about his own career, couldn't understand how Dempsey could possibly move on from such a devastating loss. So he asked him about it.
Dempsey's response was brilliant in its simplicity. He said, "Yeah, it was a tough blow, but that's water over the dam. I've got too much to look forward to waste time looking back."
He chose to focus on the possibilities of the future rather than dwelling on the disappointments of the past. And it sounds like that choice allowed him to experience a level of contentment and peace that he might not have found otherwise.
Exactly. Clinging to the past, whether it's a glorious victory or a crushing defeat, would have prevented him from embracing the present and building a new future.
It's like he decided to be the architect of his future instead of a prisoner of his past. And that idea of focusing on possibilities instead of limitations really connects to another one of Carnegie's themes, putting a stop-loss order on your worries.
Yes, setting limits on how much mental energy you invest in any given worry. You have to recognize when a worry just isn't worth the emotional toll.
It's like deciding how much you're willing to pay for something. You wouldn't spend a fortune on shoes that don't fit right. So why spend a fortune of your mental and emotional energy on worries that are going nowhere?
I love that analogy, and it's something Carnegie learned firsthand. He shares a story in his book about his own ambition to be a novelist. He'd spent years dreaming of literary fame. He even lived in Europe trying to write his masterpiece.
But it didn't work out as planned, did it?
Not even close.
Yeah.
His agent told him straight up, no talent for fiction. Can you imagine how crushing that must have been, to have a dream dashed like that?
I can only imagine. It's like a punch to the gut. How did he recover from that?
Instead of wallowing in self-pity or clinging to false hope, Carnegie put a stop-loss order on his worry.
He acknowledged the dream, accepted it wasn't going to happen, and moved on.
Exactly. He realized that pouring more time and energy into something that clearly wasn't meant to be would only lead to more heartache. He cut his losses and found a new path.
And that path led him to helping others overcome their fears and anxieties, which is pretty incredible. Talk about turning a setback into something positive.
You got it. Carnegie's story reminds us that sometimes what we think are setbacks are really blessings in disguise. They can help us reassess our priorities, uncover hidden talents, and find paths we might never have considered otherwise.
It's all about how we choose to see those experiences, roadblocks or detours that might lead us to even better destinations.
That's the key. And speaking of shifting perspective, Carnegie also emphasizes finding the lemonade in life's inevitable lemons.
Ah, that classic advice about making the best of a bad situation. Easier said than done sometimes, though, right?
True, but hear me out. Carnegie argues that instead of just bemoaning your misfortunes, you can choose to view them as opportunities for growth learning, even creativity.
It's like those cooking shows where they give the contestants a basket of random ingredients and challenge them to create a delicious meal. Sometimes the weirdest combinations turn out amazing.
Exactly.
Life throws curveballs, right? Challenges you didn't ask for and don't feel ready for. But just like those resourceful chefs, you can approach those challenges with curiosity and even some creativity. You can experiment, improvise, and transform those seemingly unusable ingredients into something valuable, even delightful.
So it's about focusing on what you can create with what you have, rather than dwelling on what you've lost.
Precisely. Carnegie tells a story about a businessman named John Palmer who was driven to despair by post-war shortages. He couldn't get the supplies he needed for his business, and he was consumed by worry and frustration. He was on the verge of losing it all, his business, his health, even his family.
It sounds like he was stuck in a negative spiral. How did he get out of that?
One of his employees, a young disabled veteran, gave him a new perspective. He reminded Palmer that even though things were difficult, he still had a lot to be grateful for: his health, his family, the chance to rebuild when things improved.
A good reminder that even in tough times, there are always blessings if you choose to focus on them. It's about shifting that perspective. You got it. And this idea of finding the lemonade connects to another big theme in Carnegie's work: the power of a positive mental attitude.
It's the idea that your thoughts have a huge impact on your experiences. By choosing to focus on the possibilities, you can create a more fulfilling and joyful life for yourself.
Exactly. And this isn't a new idea. Philosophers and spiritual leaders have been saying it for centuries. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, said it best: our life is what our thoughts make it.
It's a simple truth, but so profound. If you fill your mind with fear, worry, and negativity, that's what you're going to experience.
Right. But if you choose to focus on hope, gratitude, and possibility, your experience of life will reflect that.
It's like choosing what to plant in the garden of your mind. Do you want weeds and thorns, or vibrant flowers and delicious fruit?
I love that. And Carnegie says that cultivating a positive mental attitude often requires action. He quotes the psychologist William James, who argued that you can't always control your feelings directly, but you can control your actions. And when you change your actions, your feelings will often follow.
So it's like the saying, fake it till you make it.
It's not so much about faking it as it is consciously choosing to act in ways that match the feelings you want to cultivate.
So if you want to feel more joyful, do things that bring you joy, even if you don't feel particularly joyful in the moment. If you want to feel more confident, act in ways that project confidence, even if you're feeling a bit shaky inside.
Yes. And Carnegie suggests a surprisingly effective technique: smile. He says it's basically impossible to stay in a negative state while you're smiling.
So you're saying that changing your facial expression can actually change how you feel.
It sounds simplistic, but it's true. Your body and mind are interconnected. When you smile, your brain gets the message and releases endorphins, those feel-good chemicals that naturally elevate your mood.
So it's not just about putting on a brave face for others. It's about using a physical action to influence your internal state.
Clever. Exactly. And this idea of choosing your thoughts and actions to create a more positive life connects to another one of Carnegie's key themes: the power of faith.
When you say faith, are you talking specifically about religion? Not everyone who struggles with worry is religious.
That's a great point. Carnegie's use of the word faith is broader than that. It's about faith in something larger than yourself, whether it's a higher power, humanity, or even just the inherent goodness of life.
So it's more about having trust, believing that even when things are tough, there's a bigger plan unfolding, something supporting you, even when you can't see it.
You've got it. And Carnegie shares a lot of inspiring stories about people who found solace and strength in their faith, people who overcame incredible challenges and found peace in the midst of really tough situations.
Well, one that really sticks with me is the story of Mary Cushman. She went through unimaginable hardship during the Great Depression, struggling to feed her 5 children, her husband ill, and unable to work, losing their home, being deep in debt. It's heartbreaking.
It really is. At one point, she was so overwhelmed by despair that she considered suicide. But then something remarkable happened. She had what she described as a profound spiritual awakening. She realized she wasn't alone, that there was something larger than herself to lean on.
And that realization gave her the strength to keep going, to find a way through those dark times.
It did. She started praying regularly, expressing gratitude for the good things in her life, and trusting that even though she couldn't control her circumstances, she could control her response to them. And her entire outlook shifted. She started to see the world through a lens of hope and possibility instead of fear and despair.
It's a powerful story about the way faith, the belief in something larger than yourself, can be so transformative, especially when things are at their bleakest.
It really is. And Carnegie also tells stories about people who find strength through more active expressions of faith, too.
Like that book salesman we talked about earlier, the one who felt discouraged after Jack Dempsey's defeat.
Yes. He was struggling financially, about to lose everything, and feeling totally defeated. But when he turned to prayer as a last resort, something shifted within him.
What changed for him?
He began to see his work in a new light. And instead of just trying to make a sale, he saw it as an opportunity to serve others.
Just that small shift in perspective, that sense of purpose, revitalized his entire career. It's amazing how our mindset can make such a difference.
It's incredible, right? Sometimes the answers we seek aren't found in external solutions, but in the depths of our own hearts and in the connection we cultivate with something larger than ourselves.
That's a powerful thought. It's about looking inward as much as outward.
Exactly. And one of the most fascinating stories Carnegie shares about faith is about RVC Bodley, who found peace and contentment in the most unexpected place among the Bedouin Arabs in the Sahara Desert.
Wait, he went from modern civilization to living with nomadic tribes in the desert. What prompted such a drastic change?
Bodley was struggling with anxiety, insomnia, and just this general sense of dissatisfaction with his life. He was successful in his career, but he felt empty, unfulfilled. He wanted a simpler, more authentic way of life.
And he found that in the vastness of the Sahara.
He did. He was drawn to the Bedouin culture, their deep connection to nature, their simple way of life. He lived with them for 7 years, immersing himself in their traditions and adopting their philosophy of acceptance and surrender to a higher power.
It sounds like a complete transformation. What did he learn from that experience?
He learned to appreciate the beauty of simplicity, to find contentment in the present moment, and to let go of the worries that had plagued him for so long.
He found peace by embracing a totally different way of life, one that valued connection, presence, and surrender to something greater than himself. Do you think everyone needs such a radical change to find that kind of peace?
Not necessarily. But Bodley's story underscores a point Carnegie makes throughout his book. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to worry. What works for one person may not work for another.
So it's about finding what works for you, experimenting, exploring different approaches, and discovering the tools and techniques that resonate with your needs and personality. It's about customizing your own worry toolbox.
Exactly. And reading through all these incredible stories, these accounts of people facing their fears and finding ways to live more fully, I'm struck by how much Carnegie emphasizes self-awareness. He doesn't just give you a set of tools, he encourages you to explore the root causes of your anxieties, to understand what your worries might be trying to tell you.
So it's not just about eliminating worry, but understanding it, listening to what it might be revealing about ourselves and our lives.
Precisely. Sometimes those worries are trying to point you in a new direction, alert you to unmet needs, or nudge you towards a more authentic and fulfilling path.
It's like those warning lights on your car's dashboard. You know, they're not there to scare you. They're trying to tell you something needs attention before it becomes a bigger problem.
That's a great analogy. One of the most valuable things I've learned from Carnegie is that worry isn't always a bad thing. It's often a signal that something needs your attention.
So instead of trying to silence those worries or just shove them down, you're saying we need to listen to them, explore them with a sense of curiosity, and try to understand what they're trying to tell us.
Exactly. Sometimes those worries are the catalysts for real change in your life. Those whispers in your heart guiding you toward a more authentic and fulfilling path.
And that brings us to the thought-provoking question Carnegie leaves you with.
He's giving you all this practical advice on managing and minimizing worry. But then he challenges you to go deeper.
He asks, what if instead of trying to eliminate worry completely, we try to understand it on a deeper level?
What if we explore the messages it might be trying to convey?
Could understanding the root causes of your anxieties actually be the key to lasting peace of mind?
It's an invitation to go beyond the surface of your worries, Delve into the underlying fears, beliefs, and desires that might be fueling them.
So instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms, you're saying we need to address the root cause.
It's about cultivating a deeper level of self-awareness and then using that awareness to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
It's like those times when you're feeling super stressed or anxious and you try to distract yourself with work or scrolling through your phone.
But those worries just keep nagging at you
Mm.
until you finally hit pause and ask yourself, what's really going on here?
And maybe you realize you're feeling overwhelmed because you've said yes to too many things. Or that you're feeling anxious because you're not making time for your passions.
By taking the time to understand the root of those feelings, you can start to address them in a way that actually works.
So it's about moving from a reactive approach to a more proactive one.
Instead of just coping with worry, you're using it as fuel for growth and transformation.
It's like worry can be a teacher if you're open to the lesson.
Exactly. As you explore Carnegie's techniques for managing worry, remember that invitation to go deeper.
Cultivate self-awareness, explore the root causes of your anxieties, and use those insights to create a life that's not just free from worry, but also filled with purpose, passion, and meaning.
It's a journey of self-discovery that can lead to a richer, more fulfilling, and ultimately more peaceful life.
And that sounds like a journey worth taking.
It absolutely is.
Well, thanks for diving into this topic with us today. And remember these key takeaways as you navigate the ups and downs of life.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.